It begins with fear on the water. Imagine the year is 1718. Charleston, South Carolina, the jewel of the southern colonies, a city of brick houses, cobbled streets, and merchant warehouses filled with rice, indigo, and imported goods from across the Atlantic, suddenly finds itself cut off from the world. One morning, as townsfolk rise to begin their day, a fleet of strange sails appears on the horizon. They are not merchantmen bringing fine goods from London, nor are they navy ships protecting the crown's interests. They are pirates. At their head, a man so infamous that his very name strikes terror into the hearts of sailors, Edward Teach, better known as Blackbeard. He is a tall, broad-shouldered figure with a thick black beard, braided with slow-burning fuses that, when lit, wreath his face in smoke and flame, making him look like a demon risen from the sea. His ships blockade the harbor. No vessels are allowed to leave. No merchant cargoes are allowed to enter. For days, Charleston is paralyzed. The lifeblood of its economy, trade, is severed. Inside the city, panic mounts. Rumors spread like wildfire. Some say the pirates will burn the town. Others claim they will sack the churches and carry women and children away. Wealthy merchants fear ruin. Planters fret that their exports will rot on the docks. The governor sends frantic messages, but there is no navy near enough to come to Charleston's aid. Blackbeard holds all the power. Yet when his demands are finally revealed, they are not what anyone expects. He does not ask for mountains of gold or chests of silver. He does not demand the surrender of the city. Instead, he asks for a chest of medicine, supplies his crew desperately needs. The citizens of Charleston scrape together the drugs and bandages, and in return, Blackbeard releases his hostages and sails away, leaving the city shaken but not destroyed. Why start here, with this moment of terror and relief? Because it captures the truth we rarely tell about early America. This land was not only shaped by pilgrims, planters, and patriots, but by pirates, smugglers, and lawbreakers. Men like Blackbeard did not exist apart from colonial society. They were woven into it, sometimes feared, sometimes welcomed, often both at once. And in their lawless ways, they revealed something deeper about the spirit of the New World, a spirit of resistance, of independence, of survival at any cost. Tonight, we dive into the hidden history of America's pirates, how they fought empires, supplied colonies, bent laws, and in ways few realize, laid foundations for the revolution itself. To understand how piracy became so central to the story of America, we must first return to the 16th century, when Spain stood as the most powerful empire in the world. Its colonies in the New World produced staggering wealth, funneled back to Madrid in an endless stream of treasure fleets. At the heart of this wealth were the silver mines of Piracy in present-day Bolivia and Zacatecas in Mexico. Piracy alone produced so much silver that it became a city of tens of thousands high in the Andes, a place where life was cheap and death was common. Indigenous people were forced into brutal labor, working in dark tunnels where cave-ins, mercury poisoning, and exhaustion killed thousands. The silver extracted here was packed into bars, carried on mule trains down to ports, loaded onto great lumbering ships, and sent across the Atlantic. Alongside the silver came gold from Colombia and Peru, emeralds from Muzo, pearls from Venezuela, and spices and goods brought in from Asia across the Pacific. Imagine the sight of one of these treasure fleets, dozens of galleons, their holds groaning with riches, sailing together under armed escort. For Spain, these convoys were the arteries of its empire. For everyone else, they were tempting targets. Enter the privateers. In England, France, and the Netherlands, monarchs who envied Spain's wealth found an easy solution: authorize their sailors to attack Spanish shipping. A piece of paper known as a letter of marque transformed an outlaw into a hero. A pirate became a patriot. In England, men like Sir Francis Drake and John Hawkins made their fortunes attacking Spanish ports and plundering treasure ships. Drake became the first Englishman to circumnavigate the globe, filling his holds with Spanish loot and earning himself a knighthood from Queen Elizabeth. Spain, of course, saw him differently. To them, he was El Draki, the dragon, a pirate whose name was cursed. This duplicity lay at the heart of early piracy. One man's patriot was another man's criminal. These privateers weakened Spain, funneled wealth into rival nations, and gave colonists their first taste of a global black market. Silver stolen from Spanish ships often made its way not only to London, but also to colonial ports, where it was quietly accepted into circulation. From the very beginning, America was entangled in a world economy built on plunder. And once colonists saw how fragile Spain's empire was, once they witnessed privateers growing rich by defying a great king, the idea took root that empires were not invincible, and that breaking the rules could be profitable. By the late 17th and early 18th centuries, piracy was no longer just an imperial strategy. It had become a part of colonial life. The Caribbean, with its countless islands and hidden coves, provided perfect hiding places for pirate crews. But the English colonies themselves became welcoming harbors. In Boston, Newport, New York, and Charleston, pirates found communities eager to trade. Imagine a pirate ship limping into Newport after months at sea. Its sails are patched, its crew ragged, but its hold is filled with stolen sugar, molasses, rum, and cloth. The men swagger into town, scattering gold coins like pebbles, drinking heavily in taverns, buying gifts for women, and paying handsomely for repairs. Local merchants, far from turning them away, quietly make deals. A cask of rum is sold at half the official price. A bolt of silk, stolen from an East India merchant, becomes a fashionable gown in Boston society. Even church collections sometimes benefited from pirate donations. Governors and customs officers, their salaries meager compared to the wealth flashing before them, often looked the other way. Some even struck outright bargains, granting pardons or protection in exchange for bribes. In Charleston, pirates were so integrated that Stede Bonnet, the so-called gentleman pirate, was able to recruit men and repair ships in broad daylight. The economy benefited. Colonists got cheaper goods, merchants grew richer, taverns flourished, and towns enjoyed sudden bursts of prosperity when pirate crews came ashore. Of course, not everyone approved. Ministers thundered from pulpits about the wickedness of piracy. Officials occasionally cracked down when London demanded it. But the truth was that piracy thrived because it met a need. Colonies on the edge of empire needed goods, and pirates supplied them. In doing so, they blurred the lines between outlaw and citizen. When a Boston merchant drank rum distilled from smuggled molasses, was he complicit in piracy? When a planter sold rice to a pirate ship, was he a criminal or just practical? These gray zones defined colonial life, and they revealed just how entangled piracy was with survival in the New World. As the 18th century wore on, the golden age of swashbuckling piracy began to fade under the weight of crackdowns. But piracy's younger sibling, smuggling, rose to take its place. Smuggling was quieter, less dramatic than boarding a treasure ship, but no less revolutionary. At the center of it all were the Navigation Acts. These laws, first passed in the mid-17th century, sought to bind the colonies tightly to England. Colonists were required to ship their goods in English vessels, to sell certain exports like tobacco only to England, and to buy European goods exclusively through English merchants. It was, in essence, an economic leash. But colonists, used to the freewheeling trade of earlier decades, chafed under these restrictions. Enter the smugglers, take the molasses trade. New England distilleries needed molasses to make rum, a key product for local consumption and for trade with Africa in the triangular trade. English molasses, however, was expensive and inferior to the sweeter, cheaper molasses from French and Dutch islands. The solution was obvious: buy it illegally. Smugglers ferried barrels of molasses across the seas, bribing customs officials, forging paperwork, or simply unloading cargoes at night in secluded coves. The scale of smuggling was enormous. Some historians estimate that by the mid-18th century, half of all colonial trade was illicit. This was not the work of shady outcasts on the margins of society. Leading citizens, including John Hancock, were deeply involved. Hancock's ship, the Liberty, became a symbol of resistance when customs officials seized it in 1768 on suspicion of smuggling wine. The seizure sparked riots in Boston, inflamed anti-British sentiment, and helped set the stage for revolution. Smuggling was more than economic defiance. It was cultural. Colonists came to see themselves as independent traders, beholden to no one, least of all distant officials in London. Every cask of illegal molasses, every bale of contraband cloth, every bribe slipped to a customs officer was a small declaration of independence. Over time, these acts of quiet rebellion hardened into a political identity. The colonies became a people accustomed to breaking laws they considered unjust. Smuggling was piracy by another name, and it prepared the colonies for the day they would openly defy the crown. Piracy's influence on America was not only economic, it was also ideological. On the decks of pirate ships, a strange experiment in equality and democracy was unfolding, centuries before such ideas became mainstream. Life at sea was harsh, dangerous, and unpredictable. To survive, pirate crews developed systems of governance that gave ordinary sailors a voice. Unlike the rigid hierarchy of the Royal Navy, where captains ruled with iron fists and sailors were often impressed into service against their will, pirate ships operated with surprising fairness. Crews elected their captains, often choosing men based on bravery, skill, or charisma. Captains had great authority in battle, but could be removed by vote if they abused their power. Quartermasters balanced the captain's authority, representing the interests of the crew and overseeing discipline. Pirate codes, written agreements signed by all crew members, spelled out the rules. These codes covered everything, from how loot would be divided, to punishments for theft, to compensation for injuries. In some cases, a man who lost a leg might be guaranteed a set amount of gold, ensuring he would not be left destitute. Loot was distributed far more equally than on merchant or navy ships, where captains took the lion's share and sailors received scraps. On a pirate ship, while captains and officers did get extra, the differences were not extreme. Ordinary sailors could expect a decent share, giving them a real stake in the venture. In this way, pirate ships became floating communities where cooperation and mutual respect mattered more than rigid authority. Of course, pirates were still criminals, and their democracy was limited. Enslaved people captured at sea were not equals, and brutality was never far away. But the fact remains that thousands of men experienced a form of self-rule on pirate decks, one that stood in stark contrast to the authoritarian structures of Europe. Did these practices influence America? Direct links are hard to prove, but the echoes are there. Colonists who heard of pirate democracy may have been inspired by it. At the very least, the existence of these alternative systems showed that hierarchy was not inevitable, that men could govern themselves if they chose. In a world where monarchy was the default, that was a radical idea. By the early 18th century, the golden age of piracy reached its bloody end. The very powers that had once encouraged privateers turned against them. England, France, and Spain all realized that piracy, once a useful weapon against rivals, had grown into a destabilizing threat to trade itself. Colonies, pressured by their governments, began to crack down. The response was brutal. In 1718, the governor of Virginia sent Lieutenant Robert Maynard to hunt down Blackbeard. Off Ocracoke Island, Maynard's ships cornered the pirate. In a fierce battle, Maynard's men boarded Blackbeard's vessel. The pirate fought like a man possessed, sustaining more than 20 sword wounds and 5 gunshots before finally falling. His head was severed and hung from Maynard's ship as proof of victory. In Charleston, Stader Bonnet was captured, tried, and executed, despite pleas for mercy from his supporters. In Boston, more than 40 pirates were hanged in a single day, their bodies displayed in iron cages along the harbor as grim warnings. Across the Caribbean, the gallows became the symbol of imperial power. And yet, even as piracy was crushed, its spirit lived on. Colonists did not forget how to bend the rules, to defy unjust authority, to seek profit in forbidden ways. Smuggling remained rampant. When the Revolution broke out, Americans revived privateering, issuing letters of marque to attack British shipping, just as Elizabeth had once done against Spain. These privateers captured hundreds of British vessels, weakening the empire and enriching the new nation. Piracy's methods and mentality continued, reborn under new banners. The legacy of the pirate was not buried with the bodies in gibbets. It lived on in the defiance of colonists who no longer saw the king's law as sacred. So, where does this leave us? Too often, we tell America's story as though it was built only by lawful men in powdered wigs, noble farmers, and brave soldiers. But the truth is more complicated, more human, and more rebellious. Pirates, privateers, and smugglers played a central role in shaping the colonies. They connected the New World to global trade. They defied empires, they fed economies, and they even experimented with radical ideas of equality and governance. They blurred the line between criminal and patriot, villain and hero. Without their lawlessness, the colonies might not have developed the habits of independence that prepared them for revolution. So the next time you picture the birth of America, don't think only of Philadelphia and the Declaration. Think also of Charleston under Blackbeard's blockade, of Newport's taverns filled with pirate gold, of Boston's smugglers unloading molasses in the dead of night. Think of the countless small acts of defiance, at sea and on land, that carved out a culture unwilling to bow to distant authority. Perhaps in the end, America was born not only in the halls of Congress, but also on the decks of pirate ships and in the hidden coves of smugglers. What did you think about today's video? Comment your thoughts and suggestions for my next video below.